Welcome to the Commonwealth Home Ownership Podcast, the real estate investing podcast for Canadians. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just getting started, you've come to the right place. If you're looking for a way to take control of your life through real estate investing, stay tuned and be sure to join us at CWHO.ca, your hub for all things real estate investing in Canada.
Hey everyone, Phil Wong here, and welcome to another episode of the Commonwealth Home Ownership Real Estate Podcast. Brad and I have decided to do something a little bit different moving forward. We'll still have guest speakers and interviews, but we also wanted to put in some unscripted episodes where we can riff a little and discuss some real estate topics that are front of mind and relevant to what's going on now. We're hoping this opens up some room for a little bit of serendipity, so let's see what happens. Hope you guys enjoy.
What are your thoughts on what's happening right now in the rental market? Because I've kind of got it's been interesting.
It has. I mean, there were definitely some rough times at the beginning when COVID first hit in the first few months, because a lot of people were, losing jobs. I think there was a bit of an overreaction in the government in terms of thinking how bad it was. I mean, it wasn't a bad thing for them to do to keep everyone safe, but at the same time, I think there was a huge overreaction. So then a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people ended up not being able to afford rent. The government did a little bit to help the landlords and tenants. For the month of April, landlords were not allowed to evict, and starting in March and April, banks were allowing landlords to defer mortgage payments, which was great.
So it's funny how, you talk about the government overreacting, or maybe not overreacting, but just reacting. We'll call it reacting.
Reacting, sure.
And the reason I say that is because Victoria, Melbourne, my home state and city, my family has just been, let out of a 4-month lockdown. And so they've just gone 2 weeks in Melbourne with no new cases of COVID.
Wow, that's impressive.
So, yeah. So, I mean, there was an initial lockdown, and they started with a release kind of program earlier in the year. And then, the numbers started creeping up a little bit, nowhere near kind of Canada's numbers, but they then went straight back in, locked the state down. There was no interprovincial, interstate travel allowed, no international travel really allowed at all. And they went into a really, really strict lockdown, really strict. So, I mean, you talk about the government here reacting or overreacting, so it's funny now because we're kind of coming into our second wave, and they've just come out of sort of dealing with the first wave in a way that was super stringent. And, now they're kind of, I don't know, experiencing it different to how we are. And it's funny because Joe Biden actually reached out to the Australian government to ask them how they have dealt with COVID. So it's really, it's interesting how it's been dealt with here. And, you talk about how it's affected kind of tenants in that early stages of everybody freaking out and wondering where it's going to go. And, I think it almost felt short-lived a little bit for the first few months, and then we were let back out. Like Alberta, Jason Kenney, Alberta, we were shooting for kind of a early back to work rollout, and they did it even earlier than they were expecting to do it, and now we are where we are.
I mean, I think there's good and bad, right, between the two methods. And I have an uncle in Melbourne as well, so he was mentioning to me how strict it was. If you caught outside talking to your neighbors, you're gonna get a fine, or the police drive by and see you. So it was pretty bad.
That's pretty strict.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think, in that context, I think what Australia did was, or at least what the state of Victoria did in Melbourne, was they went for full measures, right? Whereas I think Canada and Alberta, in a lot of ways, went for half measures. Right? So we didn't.
Yeah.
So, and I think the good thing is now, if it's true, if they have no new cases for 2 weeks in Melbourne, that is massive.
And the other states have just been operating as business as usual. They've been allowed. The other states have just been allowed to do as they please, but there's been no interstate travel.
Mm-hmm.
So the all of the the Australian rules football was being played in the other states, and there was crowds. 30,000 people would go to football, no problems. And it just they weren't really having to deal with it like we are here. We're free to travel interstate, and
Mm-hmm.
it I don't know. It really makes it difficult when, like you said, it's kind of like a half measure and a recommendation. Like a recommendation is only useful if you actually hear it. Like there's plenty of people out there that don't even listen to the news or watch the news, or they wouldn't even know that the recommendation exists, let alone actually abide by the recommendation or go over and beyond to maybe do more than what the government's recommending.
And well, I mean, the number of cases reflect that as well, right? Now that Alberta's spiking, all the provinces are spiking. I was just talking to someone in Quebec today, and they said they've been in full lockdown since October 1st.
Yeah, I've heard that they're pretty well locked down, and there's no real end in sight right now for those guys.
So, I mean, I think doing full measures up front versus half measures along the way, I think has you see the differences now in terms of COVID cases.
Yeah, but it has to be thought out. I feel like that's half of the battle, or half of the problem is, like you said at the start, it's really reactionary. And it, like Justin Trudeau came out the other day and said, well, there's the money's not endless. There's not endless amounts of money, and it's I would have thought there would be a more detailed plan after the first couple of weeks after the reaction and the implementation of the CERB and the lockdown, the initial lockdown. It's like, okay, well, while we are in lockdown, let's work and create a plan to understand how we can deal with this. And not only that, but how can we deal with it if we do run into a second wave? Let's not spend all of the money through the first 6 months. And then when the second wave hits, tell the Canadian public that, hey guys, there's a limit and there's really not much more left. And we never had a plan the whole time.
I mean, again, this is everything's, hindsight is 2020. And not to say it would have worked out anyway, but I'm just curious what would have happened if we went into very, very strict lockdown procedures. The government went out and paid everybody what they needed to pay to keep them alive for a month, and that's it. Right. So then that would maximize or minimize chances of COVID spreading at all in the first place. And then after a couple of weeks, after a month, after like, for example, in state of Victoria, in Melbourne, or in Australia, 2 weeks, no new cases.
Isn't that what they did in China? They locked down Wuhan. Like, you were not allowed to leave your apartment.
Yes, that's what I heard. Yeah. I was reading some like I was reading some stuff about people how they were going crazy, being stuck in their little 300 square foot apartment. And how one guy, he was training for the marathon, who was a marathoner, and he couldn't train. And so one day he decided to run around his 200 square foot apartment 6,500 times. Just run in a circle
until he got dizzy.
Until he got to 50 kilometers. He clocked 50 kilometers inside his apartment.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, I think they were pretty strict at the time.
So I mean, I've noticed just with a couple of tenants, they've progressively struggled, I would say, or potentially through kind of the latter months. I think in the earlier months with the government subsidies or the programs or relief programs they put in place, there just didn't really seem to be a big drop in rent payments and or them being on time either. Like I didn't really notice. Did you have any major issues with?
Yeah, I had a couple. I had to drop rents for a couple properties just to help with the tenants out, just so they could, make it through the pandemic without being too financially strained. And then I did lose a couple tenants as well. They just they had one set where there was just a couple roommates, but they both lost their jobs. They're both in the service industry, restaurant industry, and they both lost their jobs overnight. So so they paid me. I believe they paid me April's rent, and they told me straight up, hey, look, like this is gonna be a last month. Like we're both unemployed. They're both young, so they both decided to move back in with their parents for the time being. But that was it. So I didn't pursue them much further. As long as I just renewed the lease. I just ended their lease early. I didn't penalize them for anything. I mean, it wasn't really their fault. So
Yeah.
and then
Yeah, we had one tenant that was, I think in the end they decided, well, they were looking for a place to buy, and the timing, the way it kind of shook out was that I'm not even sure if they moved in the end. They had a lease in place. It kind of worked okay because we had a tenant that was moving out early, so we were okay with that. And typically, if we can find somebody to fill the unit, and somebody's going to leave early, but we have somebody moving in, to us that's not a big deal. That's fine.
Same, yeah.
No problem. So, but yeah, I think in the end it was, so we had a tenant moving out early, we had a new lease in place. It got to the time when they were going to move in. They didn't move in because they bought a place, and then we had to go back to the drawing board and find another tenant to move in. And so the middle tenant who bought a new property, or a property for them to live in, they ended up paying that first month's rent because the timing was bad. Essentially, there was no one to move in, so we had to advertise and find somebody. So all in all, it all worked out. But other than that, it hasn't been, I would say, touch wood, too bad.
You know what? Surprisingly, aside from those handful of tenants, I've had a few vacancies over the course of the summer as well. Actually, I had quite a few. I had about 8 vacancies this summer. So I was kind of worried.
Yeah, that's a few.
That's a few, yeah. So I was kind of worried. It's almost I was kind of worried I wouldn't be able to fill them all. But surprisingly, I had no issues, and I was able to raise rents on a handful of them as well.
Yeah, interesting. I did a little bit of research on some of the average rents compared to last year. This was probably a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, rents are kind of right where they were.
Yeah, they haven't changed. Like I didn't go up much. Unfortunately, everything else is still going up, despite incomes, people losing their jobs and everything. Like insurance has gone up, taxes have gone up, all those things, all those costs have gone up. So I had to raise my rents a little bit. But uh, but so far, I feel like the rental market has been that's pretty strong actually, considering COVID.
Yeah, and I wonder, Phil, if maybe this is just me and my kind of sense of things going on in the world, but I almost feel as though people have been looking to move away from kind of common space living, like condominiums, apartments, places where you have to hop in an elevator and press the button that 100 people before you have pressed the same day. People are looking to get out of those areas where there's shared amenities, and move into a single family home or a suited house that they have their own yard. And
Well, I've been reading a few articles about that recently, and that I think there is a trend towards larger single family homes during this whole era of COVID, just because before, when people were going to work, they would leave their home, right? They would leave their home, they would just spend their time, most of their day, inside an office, and then really the only times they're at home is before for sleeping and for dinner and evenings. So they would spend maybe 12 hours, 14 hours at home, and then they would spend another 8 hours at work. And or even less time at home. But now when people are working at home, they're spending 100% of their time or 90% of their time in their home. So the apartments aren't really aren't cutting it anymore. They're a little bit cramped for it to be stuck in that small space. So I think a lot of people wanting a home office and whatnot, they're moving into a larger space because they don't have to go to work anymore a lot of times. More and more
Yeah,
people working from home.
that's a really good point. We're doing a renovation project right now, and we're making sure we build a nice sized office in that property, so that when people come through the house to look at it, to purchase it, it has, it's going to have 5 bedrooms, so it's perfect for a family. It's going to have a separate office space, so people can actually work from home. I think that's going to be really important soon, is having that extra space in a house that you can work from home comfortably, not sitting in your kitchen at your counter. I mean, that's okay for a week, maybe 2, but beyond that, it's pretty tough.
For sure.
You need a decent home office, a decent setup, so you can actually focus and
well, especially if you're doing this, right? If you need to Zoom your coworkers or whatnot, it's got to be difficult when you're in the middle of the kitchen, when someone's cooking in the kitchen or playing TV in the living room, and they got all this background noise. Yeah, absolutely.
Kids running around.
Kids running around, your dog barking.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, I have a question for you. What do you think? What's your opinion on 2021? Because I know you and I have kind of talked about this a few different times, and it was a little while ago. So what are your thoughts now based on where we are today?
I don't know, I've been keeping an eye on home prices over the last few months. Now that we're kind of even in the second wave, it's hard to say, man. Like CERB is still going; it hasn't dropped off yet. So I'm curious about the effects of that when that happens. Mortgage deferrals are just falling off now in the last couple months. So that's slowly affecting people. I mean, people, if things are going well, they would have spent the last 6 months, building a nice cash pile. So that might not have any effect for a long time, for at least another half a year, if people saved up well. So, but truth be told, it's hard to say. But I don't think it's gonna change much, especially if you're looking in the lower, the mid to lower price ranges under $500,000. I don't think there's going to be a huge change in prices. If single family homes have been going up month over month, year over year.
Single family. I was just about to say the last excuse me, the last report that we got through our website there, it had the only property type to increase in value was actually single family.
Single family, yeah. So I think townhouses or semi-detached kind of more or less stayed the same. And I believe row houses and condos took a bit of a hit. Like but they always take a bit of a hit in a bad economy, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's interesting. Condos have kind of done this kind of plateau, little kind of not much, and then now they're back to where they were 10 years ago. So
yeah,
if you bought a condo 10 years ago in Calgary, you're back to exactly where you started. Minus principal pay down. So.
Yeah, where single families have been doing well. I mean, they're not spectacular, but still, 1-2% month to month, year to year.
But if you're playing the cash flow game, if you've got decent, positive cash flow, and you're in a decent neighborhood, I guess, you're going to be doing okay. You're going to be doing okay. I think especially if your properties are suited and you have that dual income, where you can get through if you have a vacancy in one of your suites. Maybe
absolutely
it's downstairs or upstairs. Maybe it doesn't really matter too much as long as you've got a decent reserve fund. And I think actually if we just kind of revert back to the 2021, I think that is actually a really important piece, is just maybe ensuring that through the end of this year and through at least the first 6 months of next year, is maintaining a solid reserve fund for your property, or either topping it up now or just allowing your cash flow to build up a little bit and maintaining that through the early parts of next year, because I think it's going to be interesting. Nobody's really sure exactly what's going to happen, and especially as cases creep up here. If we do go through another lockdown phase, maybe it'll hit a little harder this time, and people may not get through it. I'm not sure, but it'll really pay dividends if you do have a strong reserve fund for each property.
For sure. So what's your forecast for 2021 at this point?
Yeah, I'm interested in sort of March, April 2021. You and I kind of mentioned it or talked about it in previous conversations where, the government, what are they called? The CERB, is it?
Yeah, the CRB payments. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that ended and they changed the name or created a new one. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't I haven't hopped on any of those programs, but to me, I find it would be interesting to see how people get on that, or how they progress after their subsidies have ended. And I think the first month or two, like you said, if they've been able to save a bit of a pot of money, but if they're not back to work, that first month or two or three, they may get through that okay. However, they also may have to spend any of the money they've saved up or any of their other savings to get through those months.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're then not back to work, but also their subsidies have dried up, that's going to be a bit of a precarious position to be in. So I personally think that if we watch kind of that April, maybe if people make it that far, I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, if they the money isn't unlimited, but I'm sure the government will still try to do something to keep the people, above water. So who knows? There might be another pot of money somewhere down the road. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that we mentioned this before, but I think 4 or 5 months after, we were estimating 3 months after it ended, but you never know. So March, April, I think we'll definitely see something if there hasn't been any additional subsidies from the government.
Yeah, and that's you hit a key point there. When it ends, like when is it actually going to end? What I understood. Maybe you could look that up. But yeah, I mean, the other part is the interest rates are really low. So I was talking to one of the mortgage brokers I deal with the other day, and she actually said that it's been really, really busy, just continually busy for her throughout this year. People are still buying, they're still borrowing, and there's a lot of people going back in and actually breaking their term to benefit from the low interest rates.
Yeah, I've done that with a couple of my properties.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you go. So, I mean, I'm looking at doing that potentially with a few. I'm kind of weighing it up right now.
I know, it's surprising because one of them, I had a penalty of $3,000 to break and the benefit would have been something I would have saved $12,000, right? So it made sense. It made sense to pay the $3,000 and break the mortgage, but I never got charged.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Did they didn't roll it into the new balance?
Not that I know of.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been okay if they rolled it in as well, but they didn't mention anything about rolling it in. They didn't charge us. They just gave us a brand new mortgage, broke the term 2 years early.
Yeah, we rolled one in we broke a term 12 months early on one, and I mean, our penalty was about 5,000, something along those lines. Okay. 5,000, 5,300, but our payment reduced by $500 a month. So we will get that 5,000 back in the first 10 months.
Yeah. So
I mean, it was well worth it, and the interest rate is lower as well. So in the long run, it'll play out.
5,000 for 1 year. That's huge, man. I think that's a bit steep, no?
Yeah. The penalty was 3, and then there was some other fees of,
I see.
Oh, there was a shortfall. Sorry, there was a shortfall on the appraised value.
Ah, gotcha.
So
Okay.
the actual penalty, yeah, you're jogging my memory here. So the actual penalty was about $2,000, but there was a shortfall of 3,000.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So all in all, it was about 5K, but it was still worth it for us to do that. And obviously, appraisals have been interesting during this time. Appraisals have been all over the map, I would say. I mean, I've got a couple of appraisals pending right now that they'll be probably happening next week. Fingers crossed. But I've seen a difference in $70,000 for essentially the same house. Two of separate streets are side by side. The difference in the appraisals was $70,000.
Wow.
72,000 to be precise. Variance. Like, needless to say, I went back and challenged the low appraisal and had them redo it. And somebody else ended up doing that appraisal for a second go round, and we got a better value. But it's crazy. It's crazy out there right now for appraisals.
Yeah, I'm just looking. Sorry, I'm just to sort of interrupt. I'm looking for a SERB here, and looks like SERB has ended, as far as I know, according to the.
Yeah.
But I can't tell what has replaced it. I'm just and right now there's just a lot of stuff to go through. So now it's probably not the best time to look at it. But for our listeners who are looking, yeah, I would definitely look into whether something has replaced SERB. Looks like SERB has ended as of this. As of now, it will go till December, and then that will be it.
Yeah, I thought that did it end December or September?
Let me see. I think, let's see, beginning of September.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to implement something if we're going to be looking at some sort of federal lockdown. I know that everybody's on high alert right now, and the government's speaking that way. They're speaking using the word federal in terms of implementation of some sort of COVID.
Sorry, effective.
Plan.
So I think at end of October, but effective October 12th,
Okay.
CRA will open the applications for the Canada Recovery Benefit, which will provide eligible workers with a $500 per week for up to 26 weeks for those who have stopped working and who are not eligible for EI. Or had their income or employment reduced by 50% due to COVID. So these will be paid in 2-week periods. So 26 weeks as of October 12th will still be another $2,000. So I mean, that's still what? It's still till next April?
Another 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where are we now? Halfway through November. Yeah. So halfway through April. Yeah.
Yeah. So till April. So still more or less the same thing, $2,000 a month. All right. But so that'll go till April. So if that's the case,
yeah,
we might not see anything until August, June.
Yeah, give it a couple months.
July,
give it a few
August.
months.
Yeah, July, August before we notice any significant.
So there
hits.
you go. That's point in case right there. So basically, if you can maintain a strong reserve fund, or at least build it, you've got sort of 6 months. 6 months to make sure that you've got a staunch reserve fund for it.
And I know we've talked about this too, but just for our listeners who are listening, what is your definition of a strong reserve fund?
For me, I look at it as approximately 3 months worth of expenses.
Okay.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, to be honest as well, and actually for me, it also depends on the property and the cost of that property. Some properties have a higher value of expense. Like, might have a property that's got $2,500 cost per month, whereas some other properties are $1,000. So I also look at access to credit, access to capital, to cash. Where could you, if you needed to, where could you pull money from if you needed to pull money from somewhere?
And also, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you the same question. Go ahead.
For me, it's very similar. 3 months worth of cost, but also comes down to a lot of other factors too, like how old the property is, right? If it's a brand new property, likely you don't need as much. And again, depending on the cost of the property, for a two and a half grand for like I have some that are quite expensive as well. So $2.5 grand monthly cost, so you'll need $8,000 give or take, right? To support that. Whereas something that costs $1,500, you just need about 5,000. That should be enough. However, another thing I like to do too is when they're getting in the slightly older, I wouldn't even say that much older, but I'd say like 5 years. Once you hit the 5-year mark, things start to go. So, certain things, hot water tank, you're looking at a few more years, and then that you might not need to replace that, give or take. Some of your appliances might be on the verge getting a little bit finicky, might need to be repaired or replaced. I just replaced a fridge in one of my properties that's only 5 years old. No, wow. 7 years old now, but the fridge just went, for example, on one of my properties. So what I like to say is either 3 months or your most expensive repair or replacement, whichever is higher. So if you feel like you have a furnace.
Yeah, so you're looking at about 4,000 there.
Yeah, so whichever is higher, right? 3 months or your most expensive item. So that way I know that either way, if your most expensive appliance breaks, you'll be able to cover that. Even so for example, even if you have a really inexpensive house, so like with a very low upkeep costs, they'll say you only need $1,200 a month for whatever reason, but you have a $5,000 furnace that's 20 years old, then I would, so instead of having $3,000 or $3,500 in the bank, I would still have minimum of $5,000 in the bank in the event that starts to go.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it as well. Like you said, there's many other factors. It's not just the mortgage payment, insurance, tax. Like there's those other items in that property as well that you might need to cover the cost of.
For sure. And so I was speaking to this investor, and he had a really good advice. He had have more cash in the bank than you feel comfortable having. So if you feel you get to a point where, yes, this is what I should have, and then just have a little bit more just in case. So that way,
mind that.
that way you never have to worry.
Yeah, that's not a bad way to be. Yeah, I was it must have been a few months ago now, in a call I had with some investors. I basically I told them that part of the plan for the next kind of 6 to 12 months was to allow cash flow to amount and build up and just solidify the reserve funds. So I think that's a good way to be. That's a good plan.
Yeah, I typically tell my investors, don't expect any payouts for the first year or two. Just to build up that healthy reserve fund. And then once we get to that, whatever number we need to get to, it's property dependent. And then after which we can decide whether to pull out the money as income or, reinvest it or whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah, that's a good idea as well. And it's really dependent on what you're buying as well. If it's turnkey, if it's brand new, there's just so many variables or factors in whatever it is. If it's a suited property or a single family on its own, a single family on its own, and you have a vacancy, well, then that's a full month of costs. You've got no income being generated. If it's suited and you've kind of got it, it's very rare. Like it's been rare in kind of my case, I guess, that I've had both an up and a down, not rented at the same time or vacant at the same time. Typically, there's always someone in one of the units.
I agree. I don't think I've had both completely vacant since the day it started. Until from the day it started, obviously, but the day I bought it, it's empty. But since then, it's been a few years now for some of them, and no, I haven't had a single time where both are empty. So it's nice. So, knock on wood.
Yeah. That's it. Is that real wood?
Yeah, this is real wood. Yeah.
You're good. So So what do you think? What do you think is going to happen with rents next year? Do you think rents are just going to keep creeping up slowly, or what's going to happen with rents?
I don't think, depends. I think, this year, this year it was way worse comparably than last year. I don't think rents have changed much. But again, there's been some help in that factor. I had to drop rents a few places, but I was able to raise rents in other places too, right? So more or less, I'm kind of came out the same.
And so, like you're dropping rents in some of your places. Is that because you just had a bunch to rent out and sort of the
It's like some of the
same?
vacancies, for some places they were just vacant, and I just wanted to get it rented faster than, sooner than later.
Okay.
So that's just as an incentive, I just lowered the rents a little bit just to get someone in there quicker. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't have that vacancy. Again, there's a lot of it comes down to uncertainty too. I wasn't really sure what was going to happen with COVID. I didn't want to let it sit for too long.
Yeah,
So
totally.
so I priced it, a little bit under market just to get it out and rented. Some other places where tenants were already there, I was, because of increasing costs, I had to raise rents, not much, like, $50 a month, $25 a month, something.
Yeah.
Just a little bit, just to help cover my costs. And so, yeah, but overall, I think I came out more or less even. But in terms of next year, it's really hard to say. Again, I think, but from what I've seen over this past year, the rental market has been strong. I would agree. I haven't had very long vacancies. A few places had no vacancies at all. The places were able to get rented. The tenant moves out, get the cleaning crew in one day, get it all done. Next day, tenant moves in. So I think if things are going to go the way they are, because people have, their savings that would have gone towards buying a place, slowly being chewed up from COVID, lack of employment, uncertainty, fear of the market, where it's going to go. I think a lot more people are renting now, is the impression I'm getting.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I think the rental market's going to stay strong. So I think it's a good time to be in the rental market business.
Yeah, I think it'll probably, it'll keep people that are renting for longer. Really, obviously there's people that are still working, they've still got that income, and they're able to qualify for mortgages, which is it's such a great time with low interest rates to qualify for a mortgage right now, if you can do that. But for the people that can't, and like you say, if they've had to dive into savings and whatnot, they're going to be renting for a little bit longer now. So, as an investor or a landlord or a rental housing provider, as some like to say, this next year is going to be a fantastic year to find new deals and opportunities. We're already seeing them come through, in all honesty, and have been, even from springtime this year. We tried to buy, I think we put in about 15 or 16 offers on properties, and it was a hot market. These were renovation project houses, and it was hot. There was people lining up down the street to get in to look at these houses, and it didn't matter what day or night it was. It was crazy. It was a crazy spring. That was actually, it was summer. It was all that kind of built up angst over the spring lockdown period, and when people were let out again in June, it was crazy. It was crazy. Like, there was so many people out looking at real estate and good deals that would come on the market. They'd be on the market for 10 minutes, and you'd get a phone call and, okay, I'm jumping in the car. I'll see you there. Shoot up, have a look, go home and crunch numbers, put your offer in. Sorry, we got beat. We got beat by 5. There was 5 other offers, and one went for 40,000 over asking on one of the houses. Like, it was mad. It was madness.
That's crazy, man. But I think that's another testament to single families. So you're looking at single families, right? I'm assuming.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think another testament to, mid-range, low-range single family housing is that even if, even for people who did lose some income, who may have been able to afford more expensive properties before, because of COVID, I think that a lot of people are getting pushed down into the lower price range too. So
Yeah, and
then,
the one thing, Phil, that hasn't really been publicized all that much is um what was that? What was that called? Sorry, I'm having a brain fade here. The stress test. The stress test was reduced. So
yes, it was.
not only do we have better interest rates, but the stress test was reduced, made it easier for people to get into their first property. And I don't know. I don't tell me if I'm wrong here, but I just don't think that was talked about a whole lot.
It wasn't really talked about at all. I think the main focus has been just on how low the interest rates are, but hasn't really talked much about how much the stress test was reduced.
Yeah, so I mean, when the stress test came out, it obviously bumped the price ranges around a little bit. So people that were originally looking for a $500,000 house were now looking for a $420,000 house. So it really kind of just shuffled around or created that median. That median price range was right in that kind of $420,000 to $430,000 range.
Yeah, because what was the stress test before? 5.34%, right? I believe that was the previous one.
I think you're right. Yeah,
and then now it's 4.79%. So that's a huge
big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a massive difference, especially on those $400,000 price range.
Or more, right? Or 500,000. I mean, that would be tens of thousands of dollars over the course of a mortgage, or in terms of the income that you would need.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty excited for 2021 myself. I know there's a lot of stuff going on, and like this year, 2020 has, like COVID aside, has been just an absolutely crazy, out of control year. It's been great. I've personally, work wise and real estate wise, has been a major focus, and it's been a strong year, and I'm just really excited for 2021, and just to kind of get back on the. I'm already talking about get back on the grind. I feel like I haven't slept for 3 months, but I just feel like there's going to be a lot of opportunities in 2021.
I think so too, especially if you're looking into the more creative side of real estate. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities there. Or, as an investor in general, when the market is not doing so well, I think it's always a good time to be an investor, to look for those opportunities. If you're looking to sell, however, then it might not be as lucrative.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're going to need a differentiating factor. If you're going to be selling, you're going to, look at staging or, different ways to differentiate your property, and maybe you need to spend a little bit on it to make it stand out a little bit more, or just bring it up another level so that, you're competitive in the space. Because people are looking for a nicer, newer property. Not everybody's looking for the 1970s look.
Fixer-upper.
Yeah, that's, some people just want to buy something and move into it, have space for the family, have an office to work in, and they're away. They can focus their energy on other things. So yeah, I think that's a good point. Is selling, you need a differentiating factor. It's going to be a little bit tougher, but you also touched on creative strategies. Like, there's going to be just a ton of opportunities for creative deals.
Yeah, and it'd be a great place for a seller to utilize some of those creative strategies as well, right? And it benefits both parties. Say, if you want to do an agreement for sale, you might be able to ask for a slightly better price if you say, delay that closing time for a year or two, right? Then the buyer might be willing to give you a better price to, so that way they have time to, either build equity in the property by doing some renos, or, maybe they can flip that house for a better price down the road, wherever the case may be.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I think that's a good point. The seller, or on the selling side, you can take advantage of creative strategies too,
mhm,
to essentially not lose out due
mhm.
to maybe where the market is. So I think that's a really good, it's an interesting point, because not a lot of people really, they mainly focused on the acquisition side, the
On the
buy side.
acquisition, yeah, but you gotta remember, like, it has to be win-win for both parties, and it's still a
Absolutely.
win for the seller if they can get a better price, if they can just delay that sale. If they don't need the money right away, it might be something that's very feasible for them. They get a sale locked in. They get the property off their hands, and they still get a better price down the road than if they were to try to sell it right now.
Yeah, totally. That works.
Hmm.
Awesome, man. Well, is there anything else? Hey, before, actually, there is something else, and I'll announce it, but you can run with it.
Go
So,
ahead.
just to put you on the spot, I mean, this is unscripted. So, you just released your book, and I know, like, you and I, we obviously we work together in many different facets, but I know how long you've been working on this thing for, and it's about bloody time. That's all I can say. But it must feel great that you've finally launched your book.
Oh, it feels good, man. I'm so happy it's finally done. But no, it's been quite a few. I mean, COVID delayed everything by 6 months. The release date was supposed to be in spring, and it finally just came out this fall. But yeah, no, I'm really happy with it. I, the main focus of this book was just to get people inspired, right? To get into real estate, and real estate can seem very intimidating with the amount of money involved, the how complicated it is, the ups and downs of the markets, all the stuff in the news, that's all this doom and gloom in the news. Like, real estate can be kind of intimidating to get into. So I wrote this book hoping to inspire people, to make it less scary, to make real estate less scary for the average investor, for the average individual. So I wrote it in a way that's fun, it's easy to read, and broke everything down into simple concepts and terms, and I know I have like a what if section, like, just to answer all your fears about all the shit that could go wrong in a real estate investment, and how to deal with those problems, and just to hopefully get people to think about investing in real estate, just because it is such a great vehicle for wealth generation, for retirement planning, for generational wealth, and really just to buy you freedom, right? Buy you time. I think that's the main thing. That's what you and I are doing it for. Just to
100, yeah.
just to buy us that time, that freedom, so you don't have to show up to that 9 to 5 for the rest of your life.
And it's fun.
It is fun. It is a ton of fun. I would not have written this book and spent all my evenings and weekends typing away if I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, it is an emotional roller coaster. Let's be honest. It really is an emotional roller coaster. It's up and down. It's all over the place. It's crazy.
And some days are hard. You know what? I'm not gonna lie. Some days are friggin' hard. When you got all these tenants calling you because of all these problems, and it's like, I can't pay my rent because I just got laid off. My neighbor is driving me nuts. Like, stuff like that. It comes with the territory. However, those are few and far in between for the most part. Right? I would say 90% of the time it's pretty breezy, and then 10% of the time you are working your ass off.
Yeah, like when you have to work, you have to go.
When you have to work, you are going 110%. But then I wouldn't say 90, I would say maybe 80%. 80% of the time, it's, for the most part, it's pretty stress-free. And you're just kind of just churning away. So
yeah.
So yeah, it's a short read. I really enjoyed it. The few people I've sent it to, they've really enjoyed it. So hopefully the readers who pick it up will enjoy it as well. It's called Real Estate Side Hustle for Investors. You can find it on if you type in Phil Wong and real estate, it should show up on Amazon.ca or Amazon.com. So
Well, why don't we put a link in?
yeah, we'll put a link down on our show notes, so you guys can check it out. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, man.
Yeah, no, oh, buddy, I was so stoked when I saw you post that. Oh my God, I was like, this is unbelievable because I know.
Oh man, that was like a solid year in the making. God,
I think it was more. I think it was more.
between all the edits and COVID throwing a wrench in everything. Yeah, that was a long time coming.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, buddy.
And then not to mention a lot of stuff changed, so I had to go back and make a bunch of changes to update certain sections of the book to make it reflect the current reality. It was crazy. So
that's great. No, good on you. Good on you. Really, really well done. So
thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Wicked. Okay, well, I think we should call her there.
Yeah, sounds good. I think that, yeah. Well, until next time, man. That was a great session.
Yeah, man. Right on.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening. Before I head off, I'd like to quickly mention our upcoming associate program. If you've ever wanted to get into real estate investing but didn't have enough money or experience or even where to get started, we can help. With our program, we teach you how to search for investment properties, how to determine what's a good investment property, how to do joint ventures, and the best part is you get to walk away from the program with an equity share in a property that we purchased together. We're capping a program at 10 spots and they're filling up fast. So to find out more, please reach out to us at hello@CWHO.ca. That's HELLO@CWHO.ca. See you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Commonwealth Home Ownership Podcast. Be sure to check out all of our past episodes and our ever-growing library of content at CWHO.ca. Until next time, remember to get out there, take action, and create a life of wealth by design.